Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Douglas Gabriel, Thomas Paine and the Ass of the Globalist, as I like to call myself. I'm here today with Michael McKibben, and we're going to reveal the Pilgrim Society. And if you don't know who the Pilgrim Society is, that's okay, because it's a top-secret group that literally, when it comes down to conspiracy theories, it's one of the last names anybody ever says, because it's hard to get the facts on it, and it's really hard to get the facts on who is a member of the Pilgrim Society. But we're going to now show you that Cecil Rhodes' plan was basically incorporated by the Pilgrim Society, and when you find out who are members, what they control, and how they've been working for the last 100 years or so, you may be a little bit shocked. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hi, Douglas.
You and your researchers have been just uncovering things that I have seen a little bit of this, but I gave up on the Pilgrim Society trying to do a full expose on them because you just can't find the list of members. So can you tell us how it is that you came across this and why it is that this is connected to some of the research you've been doing with the 100-year plan of Cecil Rhodes?
Well, as you know, we have been working since our Supreme Court case in Leader v. Facebook to figure out why the Supreme Court did not protect us as an inventor. Since then, we have been peeling away the layers of this onion to figure out who stole our technology and why they did it so that we could then make proper claims going forward. Somebody who had been listening to you and I talk about these things gave us a document from 1940 that identified the Pilgrim Society in a series of congressional records where a senator or a congressman from Montana entered into the official record membership lists of an organization called the Pilgrim Society. And he was quite detailed and quite thorough and clearly very determined to get this list of names and companies into the official record of the United States. What we started looking at was a complete crosswalk of names of people and organizations that we are very familiar with now. What we discovered is we have identified the contemporary versions of these people from the 1940s. This group of people completely correlates with the individuals involved in the early 1900s before World War I with Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner and the Round Table, the Fabian Society, Milner's Kindergarten, and all of these individuals headquartered out of the Privy Council in London who were involved with reorganizing the British Empire. And they were looking at a new form of British Empire based on corporatism, or essentially contracts given to certain corporations, which we now call fascism. But this was an effort that was very consciously engaged in from the early 1900s and was advocated by Cecil Rhodes, the person who funded the Rhodes Scholarships. And now these documents prove that the Rhodes Scholarships themselves were intended as a recruiting ground to basically engage Americans in the process of recreating this new type of empire that was an Anglo-American alliance. And they actually called it Anglo-American race. So they were extremely racist, and they were working on a way of organizing the world that they could control that would be above governments. And they were the people who promoted the League of Nations and then the United Nations, and are now in our world today advocating and working toward what is called the New World Order. And this is very clear from their writings that they believe that. They want a New World Order that is no longer governed by nations and is run by these unelected corporations. And then since then, we have discovered additional leaks that have occurred within the Pilgrim Society, and we now have seen membership lists that span basically from 1904, 1905, all the way up to 2014. And apparently there is a new list that's been obtained that goes right up to the current time that hasn't been released yet.
Well, I think he was very brave, Mr. Thorkelson. He only served one term, and they bashed him so bad they said it was conspiracy theories, these things that he read into the congressional record. But it's the same content that John F. Kennedy gave out in speeches, which basically said there is an elite group of people who controls our country that you do not know about. He stood up against them and he said, let's cut them off at the root. Let's cut off the U.S. Federal Reserve. People say he was killed because he wanted to end the CIA. Well, they don't mention that he also wanted to end the U.S. Federal Reserve, which basically are one and the same. When you talk about the rogue CIA and you talk about the U.S. Federal Reserve, you're talking about Pilgrim Society members almost exclusively. The big bankers is what this is about, the London and New York big bankers. And you can hear them debating in their documents that, for 1 minute, it's going to just be the English people or English-speaking people, or just the race of Britons, or the race of Anglo-Saxons, or the race of Anglophiles, or it's going to just be Anglo-Americans, because we need the Americans, so we're going to have the Anglo-American Alliance. And these groups between London and New York, it was J.P. Morgan, who was an agent of Rothschild. It was Carnegie. It was Rockefeller. It was the National City Bank. If you want to talk about corruption, go to 120 Broadway back in the old days when the American International Corporation, Lenin, Trotsky, Marx, Bolshevism started in New York City, folks. And it started with Pilgrim Society members through the bank, the National City Bank. And Bankers Trust was another company. So these groups, when they were founded, these are extensions of the British banking system. J.P. Morgan was nothing more than a teller for Rothschild, but by the time he crossed the Atlantic, he had millions of dollars to start his own bank. Rothschild money. And if you want to look at who owns the military-industrial complex, Pilgrim Society. At the time that Thorkelson in 1940 was reading this into the congressional record, there were books out about the 60 families. And they're still out there now, and people consider them to be conspiracies. They're not conspiracies at all. Those are the 60 families. We've told you how they came from Venice. They went through Switzerland, ended up in Switzerland, but they also went to Hamburg, they went to Holland, and then they went to the city of London, and then they came to New York City. And it's the same exact process of following Cecil Rhodes and his roundtable, Milner's roundtable, the Royal Institute for International Studies, and then what we have here in America was called the Inquiry when Woodrow Wilson started it, later called the Council on Foreign Relations. And throughout that, from 1903 on, and even before then with the Fabians and the socialists, who were really the kind of mindset behind the Pilgrim Society, but they wanted to be the aristocrats and they wanted to give the rest of us socialism. But they wanted to keep all the money.
The fascinating thing, Douglas, is how this larger group of people have been able to stay out of the general public's awareness of who they are and what they're doing. But the question is, how is it possible that we're talking literally probably tens of thousands of people involved with this group of people? How did they pull it off? And I think we have very strong clues in that Cecil Rhodes, when he was calling for this New World Order, he was advocating that they implement the secrecy practices of the Jesuits. Why would he be advocating specifically the Jesuits' method of operation as the basis for this Pilgrim Society? Because obviously it's been very effective.
Well, the Vatican was pretty effective before the Jesuits, but after that they became a militant organization that was institutionalized, that had the best intelligence organization in the world. They infiltrated and undermined everyone that stood in their way. So the Jesuits were the model for the Nazis. They were the model for Benito Mussolini's fascists, for the fascists in Spain. They were the model for basically Cecil Rhodes, because they were so incredibly effective. And they mixed the jihad of the Muslims and the pogroms of the Jews with the ruthlessness of the Christians that would, say, you either get baptized or we chop off your head, that kind of thing. 9 million witches were killed simply to steal their property. I mean, when we look at the bad nature of the Catholic Church, you can see that it has been very effective, and it's the oldest institution on the face of the earth, and it's still in great power.
They're not all Catholics involved with the Pilgrim Society, so they were clearly implementing a process, a way of organizing themselves that wasn't totally secret, but carried out in such a way that they stayed right below the consciousness of Main Street.
Let's just make this perfectly clear. They are anti-papal. They are anti-Catholics, okay? They're Protestants. You call it the Church of England, call it Episcopal, call it whatever you want. The point is, they simply killed anyone that they didn't like. They killed the Puritans, and that's the reason the Puritans and the Pilgrims came to America, because the English would put a tax on you if you didn't go to an English church. And after you had ran up a bit of a tax, if you couldn't pay it, they put you in jail. They literally would kill you if you did not go to their church. Let's remember that the American Revolution was not won, that the loyalists to the monarchy never gave up their connection. The War of 1812 was just them coming over and beating up on us and getting their central bank established. So once they got their central bank established, they owned us.
What is clear is that the Privy Council is using the Pilgrim Society America as an excuse. It's interesting that a lot of their events are either dinners or award ceremonies or some sort of party. On one level, you'd think that's kind of trivial. But what we now see is that those events give them an excuse to travel to the U.S. without being accused of espionage, so that all these British lords and viscounts can come to the U.S., can engage in what is treason for any Americans involved, and get away with it because all they're doing is receiving an award. This, in fact, happened within a month of Chandler coming and seeing our design for social networking in 2000. He either organized or attended an award ceremony where Sir Geoffrey Patty, who is the founder of Serco, came over for an award. Serco and RCA, which is the previous name for Serco, was engaged with Chandler and American industrialists, and neither side has been identified related to espionage or treason. This is the way they get away with murder, literally.